And welcome everybody to Inside Bodybuilding. This is Project Bodybuilding's 60-minute interview show, and we are doing one-on-one. I am your host, Matt Meinerod. With me is Taylor Normando, and the guest on this show is Justin Harris, the guru, the science guru, the guru before Lane Norton, if you will. Justin was the star of Project Super Heavyweight. The former training partner of Steve Kuclo, hasn't competed in about, 6-7 years, Justin?
Yeah, 2007, yeah.
So welcome to the show. He's also the owner of Troponin Nutrition and probably the smartest guy in the entire industry. So we're super excited to have him on the show. Thanks for coming, Justin.
Thanks. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, so that's a little bit of background on you. You were a super, awesome up and coming competitor for, the first half of the 2000s, and then you basically disappeared, and everybody wanted to know where you went. So before we get into all that good stuff, I want to kind of start with the beginning of your bodybuilding career. Tell us about how you got into it, just growing up as a teenager, and what got you into the sport to begin with.
Well, I have a kind of a singular memory of it. I remember being about 7 years old and seeing some kind of bodybuilding show on TV and just kind of being, when you're 7 years old, you're into superheroes and He-Man and things like that. And then seeing people who really looked like that, I remember just being really intrigued by it. And I think I actually, that night, tried to draw them or something, with crayons. And from then on, I knew I wanted to be big and strong. And I think when I was 9, I got a bench press for Christmas, and I got a lat pull down, when I was 10 or 11. And so, I never used them or didn't, but it was just kind of always a thing. I knew I wanted to be big and strong. And then I started working out when I was about 15. I remember because my mom had to drive me to the gym because I didn't have a license yet. She dropped me off in the morning before school. And I pretty much from 15 to about 30, I went 5 days a week and was bit by it. I didn't primarily initially. Bodybuilding was never on my mind. It was always strength. I always wanted to do. It was always powerlifting, strongman type training, and I did it initially for sports, for football. And I ended up playing small college Division III football at Alma. I did pretty well. I was a 2-time All-American there. 2000 Street and Smith preseason MVP. And went to had a couple tryouts with AFL and CFL teams, and went to a all divisions all-star game, but nothing really ended up coming of it. And then after that was done, I kind of needed something else to kind of fuel the competitive drive, I guess. And I'd been a pretty fat defensive lineman, and I probably should have went into powerlifting. That's more what I was naturally geared towards. But for some reason, I decided to try a bodybuilding show. Tried that and kind of got hooked. I moved up pretty quick, I guess, until I did the USAs in 2007, and shortly after that, just for whatever reason, just completely got burned out on the sport.
Hey, now, a quick question.
Go ahead, Taylor.
When you were in school there, knowing that you actually you went on to be very involved with your education and things like that, when you first fell in love with training, did your grades start to slip? Did you start ditching school to sort of spend time in the weight room, or how did you balance that, being that you're very enthusiastic about education as well?
Actually, I took that enthusiasm towards training and understanding the nutrition and all the science of training. And if anything, honest to God, I think that actually, it never hurt me in school. My grades never suffered, but I think it hindered me as far as my progress. I got so involved and so interested in the science and overanalyzing everything that I think, and I think that's actually a big problem in bodybuilding. I think it's almost a negative to understand too much of the science. I think if you look at someone like Ronnie Coleman, and I'm not saying Ronnie Coleman's not a smart guy, he's got an accounting degree and he's intelligent, he did well in school, but I think his approach to bodybuilding was he worked out for years, and then someone told him he should do a bodybuilding show. Eventually he gets hooked up with Chad Nichols. Chad Nichols tells him what to eat. He eats it, doesn't think twice about it, doesn't wonder if he's getting the right amount of carbohydrates or the right carbohydrates from the perfect source after workout, doesn't overanalyze all those things we overanalyze. He did the same workout for 25 years, wasn't overanalyzing his form on each movement and wondering whether he was hitting enough teres major on his back day. And
no occlusion training for Ronnie Coleman.
Yeah. And so I still love the science of it, but I think honestly, I think initially, at least, that hindered me. I would always be so worried about overtraining, or so worried about, proper form, or working each muscle the appropriate amount, or, reading too much into whatever kind of training fad was going on at the time. And
now, when you say initially, how old were you? Were you still in high school at this point?
Yeah, 15. I mean, I progressed pretty quick. I mean, well, my family's all pretty big. I've told this story before too. When I was in elementary school, we were learning about averages or normals or something like that. And I remember a take-home assignment where you had to do all these normal things. What was normal for something? And I remember the average. And it was, one of the questions was, what was the average man? And I said the average man was 6 foot 250, because that's what everyone in my family was. And so I'm thinking all my uncles and cousins and dad. And so I started weight training when I was 15, like I said. And part of it was because I wasn't that normal. I was short and skinny and wondered why I wasn't big. But then puberty kind of hit me like a freight train, I guess. And so that happened right at about the same time I started working out. So I gained about 100 pounds in a little over a year working out. So
100 pounds in a year. Wow.
Well, maybe not quite that. I'm trying to think. I was 135 or so when I started working out. And I remember being 185 pretty quick. 135 at the start of my junior year, 185 by the end. And then I was in the mid, 225 or so by the time I graduated high school.
Yeah, you said you played defensive line in football, right?
Yeah.
Now, were you a lean defensive lineman, or did you have a gut hanging over?
I was athletic for a lineman, I'd say. I certainly wasn't lean, bodybuilding lean. I played in college at about 250. I didn't have abs or anything, but I looked more like a linebacker. I kind of played the position Lawrence Taylor sort of played, more like it was a rush end,
the stand up defensive end.
Yeah, I rushed the passer. I played defense on run plays and run situations. I was in a 3-point stance, and I never played linebacker, but my primary position was kind of rush the passer. So a lot of times I'd be in a 2-point stance. Do
you remember what your best 40-yard dash was?
4.68.
That's pretty good for a white guy, especially.
I did 4.68. I had a 35.5 vertical. I did 41 reps or 43 reps at the NFL Combines at 225. I can't remember my shot. I was pretty good. I mean, I was just short. If pretty much what it came down to as far as talking to the scouts and everything is all my tests. I tested out prorated or whatever the rating was on everything except for just size, and it turned out my speed and strength were fine for a professional defensive end, but they expected me to be 6'6", and I was 5'10.5" or whatever. Right. So then you think, well, I played a little fullback in college in short yardage situations, and you think, well, maybe try fullback or linebacker. But the problem is then I'm a little slow for a fullback, and I'm also competing against guys who spent the last 10 years of their lives playing that position. So
yeah, exactly. That's the thing. It's like you can't just switch positions because those guys have been doing it for 10, 15 years.
Yeah. It's kind of like being you could be a strong bodybuilder, but that doesn't mean you're going to go in and set world records in powerlifting. It's just they're totally different worlds.
So I got to ask, when did, there's no way you got to where you are in bodybuilding being natural. So at what point did steroids and anabolics enter the picture?
The day after my last college football game, actually. Honest to God, I had been really intrigued by him for a while before then. And I actually was very against it for years. And I think partly because my strength never really had a problem. When I train for strength, I still feel like, and if you look at the world records for tested versus untested, there's very little difference in strength numbers. Now, the appearance is very, very different. But, and so as long as my strength was going up, I was always kind of really against it. But eventually I came across some and had it during my senior season and debated whether or not to take it, and finally decided to wait till the season was over. And literally, we played that last Saturday game, and I think we got back on the bus, and I think I partied that night, and the next morning started up. So,
what were you taking back then?
I think my first was 500 test and 400 deca a week.
It's very solid.
Yeah.
So that was in the 90s when things were still legit. Underground labs weren't really.
Yeah, they were Organ and Omnidrin and like the yellow top Decas, I think. Yeah, they're from Europe.
Right. So you didn't have to mess around with Mexican stuff in the 90s, or?
This is actually 2001 is when it was.
This is 2001. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, not much difference, I guess.
The dawn of the internet steroid era.
That's actually what finally kind of, the internet is what swayed me, because I was so against it for years, and I never had it pushed on me. I trained at little crappy, fitness center gyms, like YMCA type gyms, where I was me and my training partner were the biggest, strongest guys there when we were 17 and 18 years old. So it's not like, and I played, at a small college. I never came across it. It was really the internet that actually did finally get me to see the light, I guess.
You know what's cool about the internet is that I first stumbled upon, I didn't know who you were until about 2006, I want to say. And one of my first boards was Intense Muscle with Skip.
Yeah.
And it's funny how this whole, how my bodybuilding career, I'm not a competitor, but I've been in this industry for years now. And it's the whole bodybuilding tree for me kind of started with you guys, with Skip and Intense Muscle, and then Dante was there, and you were there, Shelby was there, and Dusty was there, and all these guys that are now contributing, and you're doing an interview on my site. So I think it's kind of cool that we all kind of started off on that same sort of tree, and it's kind of grown to where it is now.
Yeah, no, that's that core group of people, the kind of the late Mayhem days and the early, when the Intense was coming up. It was really, really cool time, because all these guys, well, Dusty's another example. Dusty's, just kind of a local state competitor who at the time people were saying, wouldn't even win a state show, and you see these guys busting their butt over the years, and it's kind of cool that, especially because I took some time off and I come back and all these names that were kind of like, your buddies on the internet that, we're at the bottom of the barrel looking up at the pros, now are at that level. It's kind of interesting.
Exactly.
I actually distinctly remember too when I first started getting it, probably around the same time as Matt. When I was a little younger, but when I first made the transition from going from reading Flex magazines and realizing there's an entire internet kind of sub level of bodybuilding, and I remember stumbling upon the videos with Kuclo and you and stuff like that, and I'm like, holy shit, there's a whole I didn't really understand professional, amateur, and all that, and I remember those videos and the dog crap stuff was the first sort of underground to me, non-glossy weeder version of bodybuilding that I got a glimpse of. So
the real bodybuilding,
exactly.
Follow the Weeder principles, and exactly the glossed over version of it is exact word.
Justin, how did you and Kuclo meet?
I really don't even remember. He was a 17 or 18-year-old kid, and I think I might have met him at the Arnold Classic, and I found out he lived near me, and somehow he ended up someone got him to get a hold of me, or for some reason he was in my living room at my apartment at the time. Me and my wife were living in our first apartment, and he shows me he starts talking about wanting to do a contest, and asked me what to do, and then he shows me some printout from Bodybuilding.com he had about what to eat, and and I'm looking at this kid, and he looks like he could beat me on stage right at this time, and I've been killing myself and sauce to the gills and everything, and he says, yeah, so I think you're supposed to eat chicken. Chicken's good to eat. And I remember just thinking, Jesus Christ, this kid, he's at the level. He thinks chicken has protein in it, and that's as far as he knows, and he already looks like this. And I remember right then, I think I even told my wife, I said, that kid's going to be Mr. Olympia someday. Because he knew nothing, and he already looked he took third or something at the Mr. Michigan at 18 years old, won the team, and then took third in the Open at a national qualifier, I think 12 weeks after that. And, 12 weeks before doing that, he didn't even know if you were supposed to eat chicken for protein.
And you took him under your wing pretty much soon after that, or when?
Yeah. We started then. Well, we didn't train together then. I did his diet for that. And then at some point we started training together, and he really was a great training partner. I mean, Steve, I used to he's very good, very hard trainer. I mean, he's kind of a pretty boy now, and I see him wearing his sunglasses and stuff. But when you get in the gym with that kid, he's the kind of guy who would pluck his eyebrows. But if you were ever in a trench with him somewhere, you'd be happy he was next to you, because that's. So
I gotta know. You guys are in the gym together. I'm trying to paint the picture here, and you're red-faced Justin killing it, doing 600-pound squats, and he's fixing his hair in the mirror.
But But he'll get under that. He's insane. He'd get under, the kid would do, I called it retard strength. It's kind of not politically correct, but he'd be dieting down on zero carbs, and he didn't know you were supposed to get weaker on a contest diet. So he just wouldn't. I'd think, I'd go to the gym on leg day and think, I'm burying this kid. I'm going to make this kid die. And we do a set of 20 on squats, and I'd be right on the floor throwing up, and he'd get done, and we doing another set, or are we done?
So is he in between sets of like the Widowmakers? Is he texting girls? Is he like about the latest bikini girl?
Yeah, the kids. He kind of would be, but he's I don't want to say anything negative about it, because the kid trains hard. I don't know if he still does. I don't follow him much anymore, but he would never. He's the only training partner I've ever had who really would never ever back down on a set he just, and it wasn't even like he wasn't the kind of guy who'd scream or get himself all psyched up. Like you said, he'd be walking to the gym texting someone, he'd have his hair all gelled up and then get under the squat bar and go till he puked without thinking twice about it. But
I remember seeing videos of him shoulder press when he was really young, just the obscene amounts of weight. And same thing, like he wasn't the type of guy to yell, make a big scene. He just got it done. Like, holy shit, that kid's strong.
Yeah, just good. Yeah, crazy genetics. Just, I still feel like, he's doing really well. And I think I saw some pics of the most recent shows he did at the Grand Prix, where I think he might have changed some things. He finally didn't come in flat and kind of watery looking.
Yeah, it started at the Olympia. He turned it around for sure. It looked his best.
Yeah, finally came in full. But I still think he's not even close to what his full potential could be.
What do you think, like, if you were to coach him right now, what would you tell him to do where he can get over that next hump and actually compete with, like, Keith?
I honestly, I would tell him probably to take more stuff. I don't think he takes a lot.
Yeah.
I know he did it before, and I think I really don't know if I should even say this, because I don't know what he's doing at all anymore. But I know, how there's a big push on the internet, especially with bodybuilders, always to pretend like they take less than they do.
Sure.
Or lie about it. Well, I think Steve kind of always believed that, and I would kind of help push that, because, I never wanted to take much. And I always tell him, bodybuilding, you don't really reach your peak in bodybuilding to your mid-30s. And I always say, I think you get about 10 years of hard use before your body starts falling apart. And then I think if you look at a lot of bodybuilders, I think if you look at, Ronnie Coleman probably started, using hard around 96. And by 2006, your body just starts falling apart. I think you look at maybe Dorian Yates the same way. You look at, I think Branch Warren, it's starting to come into. I think you look at King Kamali, kind of the same thing. He was probably from, it's about a 10-year, Jay Cutler, the same thing, about a 10-year span where your body just you start getting the things where you get like turnip thighs, and you start losing arm size, and your waist starts widening.
I think that's a good transition though to DC training and Dante, right?
Yeah.
Because like I said, back in 2006, I was glued to Intense Muscle, and that's all you read on there was DC training, and it was almost like this mythological training program back then. And if you didn't do it exactly the way Dante wanted, you'd get like jumped out of the form. They kick you out, and I think Skip even banned me once because I questioned something. Ironically, Skip and I are friends.
Yeah. The funny thing with that is, if you talk to Dante, if you really talk to him about it, that kind of stuff drives him crazy, because he never intended it to be that. I think at the core, basically Dante and I actually got off on the wrong foot initially, and I'll tell that story in a second, but he always kind of, I think, intended it to be, keep it simple, stupid, train hard, get stronger, work your ass off, and you're going to get bigger. And it just kind of snowballed and evolved to where it was so specialized, and like you said, if you tried one thing different, if you only did one rest pause instead of 2 rest pauses, then, you were booted off of any DC board for it. And I don't think he ever intended it to be that way. But like you're saying, all these, you got this window to really make progress before your body backfires on you. Oh yeah.
And I think we saw it with Dorian and his whole Mentor twist on high intensity, and that's essentially what DC is in a roundabout way also. And I've noticed it too, and I've come to the conclusion, I'm in my early 30s, and you can do everything, but eventually it's going to get you. And I keep telling these people, if rest, pause, and progression actually worked, we'd all have 700-pound bench presses and 1,000-pound squats. Something's got to give, right? So, like, as good as DC training is, or HIIT, is eventually you're going to stop, and then your body's going to pull back on you. Would you? Are you still a fan of DC training after all these years, or no?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of what I consider DC training, and I don't want to say that because it's Dante's thing, and so my bastardized version of it, isn't DC training. I'm a huge fan of what is at the heart of what I think, and I know Dante well, and I've stayed at his house a number of times, and we're good friends, and so I hope I can say this without stepping on his toes. What I consider DC training to be, which is train your ass off, try to get stronger. You're not going to find a guy who reps out 150-pound dumbbells for 20 reps on flat bench who's got a small chest. You're not going to find a guy who goes to ass to grass with 600 pounds on squats who's got skinny legs. You're not going to find a guy who deadlifts 800 pounds who doesn't have thick traps. That kind of concept, yeah, I'm a huge fan of it. I think there's nothing wrong with hard work, and that might be the kind of the blue collar aspect in me, but I just, I've never been a huge fan of bodybuilding as much as I've been a fan of the progress involved with weight training and building muscle. And I just like the idea of work hard and get better.
Right. Hey, Taylor, ask him. I know you're more of the nutrition guru than myself. Get him on Carb Cycling. I want to hear Justin talk about that.
Yeah. I just had a quick question because I know you've been a huge proponent of Carb Cycling. I'm just wondering how you initially came into it. If it was something you approached sort of from reading and literature that you realized would be a good thing to implement, or if you kind of just experimented and realized, hey, shit, this works. I was just wondering how you first came up with it.
I think it mostly came from, I never really read it. There really aren't many nutrition books. I think it came from my background just reading human digestion and human physiology, textbooks actually in school. It was, and I always do carb cycling, but my diets really aren't carb cycling at all. They're total calorie cycling. They're basically I typically do a 3-day carb type, 3 different versions. There's, the low carb day is much higher in protein and much higher in fat and very low in carbs. The medium carb day is kind of medium all three, lower in fat, a little higher in carbohydrates, moderate in protein. And the high carb day is pretty low in protein and very high in carbs. And kind of the approach, the concept is basically that, our bodies are still, we're pretty recently evolved from cavemen. And so if you look at the way that caveman works, is muscle is bad and fat is good, because a caveman needs to survive. And so muscle burns calories. Every pound of muscle you have burns an extra 50 calories a day. So carrying muscle around is basically the same thing as carrying a death wish around. So the body only wants that muscle if it knows there's plenty of nutrients around to sustain that muscle and there's no risk of famine or death. And so whenever you're doing a low carbohydrate, low calorie diet, eventually what your body says in caveman terms is there must not be very many woolly mammoths to kill. We need to get rid of this muscle and find a way to hold on to as much fat as possible. Now, that doesn't happen immediately. That happens over time, but it gradually does happen. And eventually your body will adjust to any calorie, any carb limit you eat, no matter how low it is. And if you don't think it does, go to Ethiopia and see people who are still alive despite being on, essentially 0 calorie diets for the majority of their life. Your body will adapt to preserve life. And so we do the low calorie day, the low carb day, kind of to be very, very far below maintenance basal metabolic rate.
So the total calories do change. You don't just manipulate the macros to meet the same calories. They do change total as well.
Calories change. Everything changes. Yeah, I call it carb cycling because that's what changes the most dramatic. Someone like me might have 100 carbs on my low carb day. I might have over 1,000 carbs on my high carb day. Yeah. But everything changes.
You cycle it around what you're training that day?
Typically typically the medium and high carb days are on our weight training days, and we'll do the high carb day on leg and back days, things like that. Yeah. Except for very big, like super heavyweight, big competitors will tend to get so bloated on high carb days that they'll have trouble training legs or back. They won't be able to do deadlifts or squats because their lower backs will get so bloated, and that's also in relation to all the gear they're taking. But as a general rule, we'll typically do the high carb day on like a leg or back day, the medium carb days on your other weight training days, and then your off days will be low days, at least early on in the diet. Eventually, you're going to have low days on weight training days also, but.
Gotcha.
And everything will be adjusted according to if you gain or lose weight, right?
Yeah, and it constantly tweaks, and we'll do all kinds of little things. We'll add the standard protocol as you start out with a couple high days a week, couple medium days, a couple low days, and eventually we'll drop a high day, only one high day a week, and then eventually we'll do add more low days. But we'll reach a point where even then you're kind of And typically, as the lows get more involved, the highs actually get higher in carbs. So there'll be a more dramatic swing, because what we're trying to do is you start running the more low carb, low calorie days in a row. Your body starts sending those triggers to turn into, the caveman famine, where your body wants to start slowing its metabolism down. And that's why we'll take the high carb, high calorie days even higher, to kind of to shoot way beyond metabolic rate, to send the body triggers that, no, panic averted. There's plenty of woolly mass to kill. There's no reason to burn off all this muscle. No reason to slow metabolism down. And so, but we'll do all kinds of things. One thing I do a lot is switch carb sources. So if we're eating a lot of rice and potato type things for carb sources, we'll switch to things like green beans, peas, or corn. Things that are where if you have 25 grams of a potato, it's a small potato, but 25 grams of carbs from corn is actually a whole plate of corn. So we can then drop the carbs down to really low amounts, but your food volume actually stays up even higher.
So you feel a little more full. And
yeah, so you're eating more food despite eating less calories.
Now, does anything get tweaked if you're either on a lot of hormones or not on a lot of hormones?
Not as much as you think, but yeah, definitely. I mean, primarily with hormones, if you're using things like insulin and growth hormone, we can take the carbohydrates much higher on high carb days, because you have kind of extra tools to facilitate the glycogen storage and shove the carbs into the muscle. But right. Other than that, really not that much.
Gotcha. Hey, let's switch gears and talk about when you were actually on stage being a badass competitor, vying for your pro card. But I want to stay on a little bit of the AAS and growth hormone insulin note here. When you were a competitor, say back in 06, 07, at the height of it all, let's do both. Let's do contest prep and off season. What were kind of your go-to chems? Let's do contest prep first.
Oh, well, contest prep, everything. Contest prep for me. Well, I would gain weight during a contest. When I did the USA's in 2007, I started my diet at 18 weeks out at 262, and I was 266 pounds at 10 days out. So I actually gained weight during the prep. And that's primarily, in the contest prep would be, I was never really, for whatever reason, I was never really into hormones or into studying them or the fine-tuned difference between them. I really don't know why. That just never, 99% of the time, I can never tell you even what my cycle was. It was basically, well, I was taking this in the off season, and so I added this pre-contest, and I don't even remember the amounts much. I remember the off season amounts primarily, but pre-contest would be, I'm very prolactin sensitive, so I can never use Tren. Tren would give me gyno within a week. I'm extremely prolactin sensitive. So I primarily used Masteron, Winnie, Test, and EQ pre-contest. I would include growth hormone pre-contest also, which I never use in the off-season.
Did you have a slightly more laid-back approach in the off-season? Then, of course, everything went up pre-contest. So that's kind of the grow into show theory?
Off-season, well, I would typically, I would stay on for about 4 weeks after a contest, and then I would take 4 to 6 weeks off. Not that I felt it did anything other than it just kind of made me feel not like a drug addict, I think. Really, I mean, I don't think it's not like anything. It's not like my normal production of anything was going to bounce back in that amount of time. But I always felt like, I don't know, I just had some kind of mental issue where I felt like I at least had to take some time off to be, or I wasn't a normal person anymore, or I never wanted to feel like an addict. Sometimes. Yeah. And then I do, basically one long off-season cycle, which was almost always 1200 test and 800 EQ. And pretty much every year at some point, I try to take the test higher, but around 2 grams, and I'd always get flu-like symptoms and would start losing my appetite, and so I'd go back down. It was pretty much for the last 2 years I competed. All off season was 1200 test and then 800 EQ, and that was really it.
Did you use a lot of anti-estrogens or anything?
No, I never. I have to use antiprolactins. I have to use like bromocriptine and pramipexole, but I never had to use, never got gyno for an estrogen. And so I'd use it pre-contest just because lowered estrogen helps burning fat. For the hardness effect, I'd use them, but I never needed to use them.
Evolution Peptides is one of the best known and most trusted chemical supply and research peptide sites on the internet. Check out Evolution Peptides for yourself. They're an American-made company and stock many of the most popular products, from melanotan 2 to GHRP2, as well as all the great research chems. Evolution has spent years developing strong supplements, dependability, a huge selection, and quick delivery. Evolution Peptides are also a big supporter of Projectbodybuilding.com, and if you like the site, you've got to like them too. In the world of peptides, Evolution has everything you need. Check them out at evolutionpeptides.com.
On topic of insulin, in the last few years, the pre-contest, which Milos kind of pioneered back in the day, has become, I would say, even the standard these days. What was everyone kind of doing when you were around, and what did you prefer?
Do you mean the pre-workout?
Yeah, sorry, pre-workout. Yeah, my bad.
Yeah, that really wasn't big at the time, and I feel like the whole peri-workout nutrition and insulin and stuff. I feel like that started, I think, with the Waxy Maze, and I was kind of. I was kind of getting into that and experimenting with higher and higher amounts of nutrients during the workout. Nowhere near what we're doing nowadays, but back then it was pretty basic. It was insulin after your workout to start, and then other guys would use it 3 times a day on maybe a high carb day or a couple of days a week in the off season. And a lot of the very upper level people would pretty much use it every day, a couple times a day. But it wasn't anywhere near what people are doing now with really high doses pre-workout and tons of nutrients pre-workout.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely shifted.
So you must really hate peptides then, don't you?
I don't know anything about peptides.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
And I hope I'm not missing anything, but I go back to what I said earlier with Ronnie Coleman. I bet you if you'd ask Ronnie Coleman what, I don't know, ALAONOP-245 or whatever, he wouldn't have any clue what those are. And Ronnie Coleman was a pretty big dude without him. So I'm sure, the one I keep hearing pop up, people always send me research studies. People I don't even know through Facebook and things like that will send me research studies and ask me to read them and give them their input. And that's really the only way I stay up to date on those things. Actually, is other people sending me stuff. But the research I've seen on that CDJ 1295, I think it's called.
Yeah, Taylor and I were just talking about that off air.
Yeah. That's the one thing where I've seen not bro science research, but legitimate research publications by. I think Pfizer's done a couple legitimate research publications where it does seem like something with a lot of potential, something they're going to use to replace growth hormone and growth hormone deficient children and stuff.
I usually tell people with the peptides, like, if you have access to legit growth hormone stuff, like I've never used GH, so I mean, if you already have all that shit, it's not something you need to start worrying about. But if you're in a position where you don't have a good connection or your country where you can't get them, they're definitely worth sort of investigating in that.
Yeah, I would agree with that, definitely.
Yeah.
So you said no test in contest prep?
No, I did. Yeah, I'll definitely take it. Yeah, I basically what I would do is that same off season cycle when I get about 4 or 6 weeks before a contest, I would do another break for about 4 or 6 weeks, and that's partly why my weight would always be down when I started my contest prep, and then I'd go back on and it'd basically be 1200 test, 800 EQ, and then I'd add in like Mastron and Winnie, and I think I'd add in Proviron a lot towards the end.
What was your highest weight you usually hit in the off season?
About 285, I think.
That must have been in Project Super Heavyweight when you're doing your nutrition talk in the second part of the DVD, and you cramp up and they have to cut.
Yeah,
I love that part.
Well, that Project Super Heavyweight, we try to show like 2 cycles of workouts, and so there's 2 leg workouts in there, but those weren't 2 separate days. That was that was one long leg workout. Steve and we do the first leg workout. Then we went and changed clothes in the bathroom and did the second leg workout.
Some Hollywood magic.
We could only afford the videographer for so long, So that cramping up was after that leg workout. That was about the most brutal leg work. I think we worked up, like 550 pounds for a set of 8 or something. Did 405 for 20 reps, another something for like 12 reps, and then we did front squats up to 500 pounds, all in the same leg workout. And so
if you could do it over, would you guys change that music soundtrack and that?
Yeah, that wasn't my music at all. That was the videographer. And what's funny is that beginning music, or the music he used, I think in a trailer or something, was the same music that for Greg Kovac's Colossus video.
Perfect.
And I remember that from like the late 90s because I had that video for Muscle Tech, and that music was, wired into my brain since then.
I used to have my friends over my apartment to watch it because they didn't buy it and I had it. And I'd be like, guys, before I throw this on, just ignore the music. Just watch the content.
Yeah, I had no control over that. And really, it ended up becoming so involved in all the editing. And, I mean, you guys know from running any kind of little business, any little concept or idea always ends up being 10 times more work than you thought it would be. And so I never liked it, and I wanted to cut it out. But by the time we went through, and my wife and I would watch, and he'd show what weight we were doing, and the weights would be wrong, or the reps would be wrong, or exercise names would be wrong. And so we'd go through like so many edits and sendbacks, and by the time it finally got all those things right, I couldn't even care enough anymore to try to get the music changed.
Right on.
No shit.
One of our Taylor and I's favorite discussions, just when we're kind of BSing together, is what makes the best bodybuilder. And I think we both came to the conclusion, I want to see if you agree or not, that you're better off being an ectomorph, and you can just ultimately throw more shit into the equation as far as chems or food or what have you, versus being an endo where you're always kind of fighting nature.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and I would agree with that. I think kind of a good example would be if you look at like Flex Wheeler, someone who would be you said ecto, right?
Yeah, ecto,
skinny.
Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure I was halfway in a daydream there for a second. But if you look at someone like Flex Wheeler, who at their, the 93 Arnold weighed 218 pounds at 5'10", 5'11", that's my height. At 218 pounds, I look like a concentration camp victim in contest shape. They're just, and if you look at someone like Brian Shaw, who is a huge meso-endomorph, as a strongman competitor, even at 430 pounds, he doesn't look as round and as full as someone like Flex Wheeler looks at 218 pounds. And so, or Dexter Jackson is another example. I agree. I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. The basis I was thinking is like, if they ever complain, like they're usually lean year round and their main complaint is not putting on size. Well, you can always, like, I don't care if you're hungry or not, you can add another meal, you can add another milliliter test.
And with supplements and things now, you can down protein shakes, you can down 40 grams of protein and not much more than the size of a shot glass.
No shit. So it's just a matter of putting in more work, but the equations are easier. Whereas if you tend to carry a lot of fat, you're always sort of walking down a tightrope, right?
Oh yeah. Well, and that's my own self is I'm more kind of, like I said, gaining size is never a problem to me. I remember when people reading on the internet and people would talk about having to eat junk in the off season, and I would be like, you cannot get big eating chicken and rice. And I'd be thinking like, geez, not only can I get big, I can get grossly fat on chicken and rice.
Me too. I'm with you.
Yeah, no. So, and working with clients, it's always the most fun to work with clients who are naturally lean. And part of the reason is because that's when you can really do the fun things with like the insulin and growth hormone. Because you got guys like that, you can have them take huge carb meals in and use the insulin and use insulin frequently, multiple times a day, and not have to worry about adding, you take a guy who's naturally an endo and you do that. If there's a few grams of fat in those meals, they start getting fat within a couple of days. Yeah. For someone who's naturally lean, they're just getting fuller and fuller and rounder. And
exactly. That was kind of our reasoning there.
Must be nice for those guys.
Yeah.
Kind of switching gears a little bit. We've seen a lot of guys, as I'm sure you've seen, pass away recently in bodybuilding without knowing all of their predisposition to premature death. What do you think is the real general problem in bodybuilding?
Blood pressure.
Is it blood pressure?
Always, yeah. It's high blood pressure. It's the cardiovascular triad. It's blood pressure. High blood pressure starts forcing problems on the heart. The heart has to pump harder, and the heart muscle grows by pushing against that higher pressure. But the way the heart works is the muscle doesn't grow outside the heart. It grows inside the chamber. And so the chamber size gets smaller. So what the heart has to do is start dilating to allow the same heart chamber size. Well, then you start getting into something called dilated cardiomyopathy, which leads to kidney damage. The kidneys aren't able to filter the nutrients and filter the fluid as much, so you get more fluid buildup, which causes more dilation, which leads to congestive heart failure, which is what these guys are dying from. It's all blood pressure.
So would you target that to the rebound after a contest, orals, rec drug use? What would you pinpoint it?
Just mostly test. Certain people are more some guys can take a huge cycle and not get high blood pressure. Most guys, when they go on a cycle, their blood pressure goes higher. And I don't think orals. Primarily test is probably the biggest thing. Trend is another thing, but it's really whatever it is. It's the blood pressure. Tom Prince, Don Long, the guy who just died is 30 years old. They're all if someone has kidney problems, someone has heart failure or heart problems or or people who have lung problems when they'll say their lungs were filling up with fluid. All those things, those are all the exact same thing. They're all related to blood pressure, and they're all related to congestive heart failure from dilated cardiomyopathy, which leads to kidney failure.
All right, I have a question just because I'm actually looking at this myself right now. What are besides the obvious, do more cardio, not get as heavy, body fat, water retention, stuff like that? Are there any supplements or anything like? How do people keep that down? Who even might naturally gravitate higher?
Don't be an asshole and go to the doctor and get on blood pressure medication. You can get on lisinopril or any ACE inhibitor. And actually, I don't understand it because I've talked to bodybuilders, and bodybuilders tell me they don't think they understand what blood pressure is. I think they think high pressure means somehow their blood's stronger or something. I really don't know what they think, but I've talked to bodybuilders who are scared to get on blood pressure medication because they think it'll somehow hurt something. And get on. There are some things. Some doctors will prescribe diuretics or beta blockers, and if you know, like ephedra or ephedrine is a beta agonist, beta blockers are the opposite of that. So something like that you might not want to get on because you'll feel sleepy. You don't want to get on diuretics because same thing. You might, you don't want to be. What's funny is people always think diuretics is the problem and that's what's causing these problems. But if you go into the doctor with kidney problems and heart failure, what the doctor's going to put you on is diuretics. So it's not diuretics that are causing the problems. But there's things called ACE inhibitors. Lisinopril is a primary medication for that. They lower your blood pressure. They actually increase, they cause vasodilation in the microvasculature. So they actually increase blood flow to the little areas like your glutes and your abdomen. If anything, they'll help you get striated glutes better. And so for bodybuilding, just go to the doctor, get treated for your blood pressure. If you're really paranoid about what medication, ask for an ACE inhibitor, ask for lisinopril, and
what numbers? Where would you recommend where people should start getting worried and be a little more proactive about that? What readings?
135 over 85, 140 over 85. Yeah. I mean, those are really the numbers they're showing. And it's you can be 180 over 110 for short periods of time with no problem. Well, it's really the long term. The higher the number, the less time it takes before issues pop up. But if you're a guy who's been on gear for 20 years, being 145 over 90 for 20 years, you're going to have some level of decreased heart function, some level of dilation of the cardio, some level of cardiomyopathy.
Awesome. It's very good information.
Is that reversible once they get on an ACE inhibitor? Or,
not really reversible so much. Once damage is done, it's pretty much done. I mean, if you have total heart failure and you have some kind of ejection fraction of 15 or 20%, you can get your blood pressure under control, get rid of that fluid, and your ejection fraction might come up to 30-35%. And that's where ejection fraction of 55 to 65% is normal. So it's not like 25% of 100. It's the ceiling of normalcy is about 55 to 65%. But ejection fraction is how much blood gets pumped out of your heart each beat. And I worked in cardiology for years. As an echocardiographer and an exercise physiologist. So I saw this every day, but there's not really so much reversible, which is why it's important. People are scared to see the numbers and they don't want to know. You guys are scared to get blood work done because they don't want to know what damage they've caused. If you just aren't dumb about it, go on, get on an ACE inhibitor, go get your prescription for lisinopril. Take it once in the morning. You don't even, if anything, it'll help your bodybuilding. Insurance is going to cover it. Even if insurance doesn't cover it, these are generic medications that cost a couple of dollars for a month. Yeah. And so they really aren't reversible. I
think it's good you point that out because I think a lot, at the end of the day, bodybuilders are pretty stupid, and if it fucks with their gains, they're not gonna do it.
Yeah. So if anything, I mean, these lisinoprils they cause dilation of the microvasculature. The microvasculature is the fine blood vessels that reach the really weird, rare areas of your body. And so if you're worried about getting striated glutes, if anything, lisinopril is going to help that because it's going to increase blood flow to those areas and increase the chance of fatty acid oxidation.
Is there any chance this is why you got out of bodybuilding?
No, and I kind of been curious. I don't know if anyone remembered me or not, but I wondered if anyone ever kind of gossiped about what got me out of it. I don't know what it was. It was an early midlife crisis. I was burned out on the sport, burned out on the people I talked to I just couldn't talk to another guy telling me the story about how he divorced his wife at 4 weeks out because she refused to cook chicken breast for him, or refused to talk to another guy whose kids didn't have college funds because he had to buy growth hormone for his, local Mr. Indiana or whatever.
So I just want to have the timeline right. You're 37 now?
35.
35. Sorry, I didn't mean to age you. So you got out when you were 28 then, right?
Yep. I did my last one. I was 28. I did one more powerlifting competition. I won the APF Michigan Championships in 2008. But I kind of switched to powerlifting for a little while. Like, if you want to know the truth, what happened one day is I was driving to the gym, and for whatever reason, I didn't want to go work out, and that never happened to me. I always loved working out. Whatever else was going on in my life, I loved going to the gym and trying to be strong. And, and it's just something about working out just always felt great. For whatever reason, I turned around and didn't go to the gym that day, and I didn't go for about 6 years after that.
Wow.
I really don't know why. I went back to school. I went for my undergrad degree was in kinesiology or exercise science. And I got kind of into math for some reason. I never was interested in mathematics my whole life. And I kind of got into that. And I went back to school for math and physics eventually. And so I did kind of another math undergrad, and I went into physics grad school and ended up doing, I didn't even think about working out with that. I did, my research was in atomic physics. I worked on a particle accelerator at Western Michigan. So I'd spend all day kind of in the basement there, 3 feet thick concrete walls for all the radiation and stuff. And down in the basement there, I didn't go to a bodybuilding board or anything for forever, but just kind of, I don't really have any explanation for it, but I finished my master's. I submitted my thesis in last April, and kind of the next morning I woke up and had nothing to do. And for whatever reason, I felt like going to the gym. And then just like that, I got bit by it all over again.
You didn't follow anything in that 6-year period. So if I were to ask you like who won the 2010 Olympia, you wouldn't know. No,
I have no clue. I know. I heard Dexter Jackson won in like 2008. I didn't know that. I didn't know that until a couple months ago. I had no idea that happened.
Did you still take any hormone replacement while you were off, or did you cold turkey everything?
Cold turkey, which was probably stupid, and looking back, I think I probably had some depression from it for a long time, but and I'm sure my levels were low the whole time. The kind of the other weird thing was I was in math and physics, and so even at my smallest and fattest, and lost 80 pounds of muscle, down there with the pasty white physics guys who none of them could even do a push up if their life depended on it. They still thought I was all the huge guy. Even at 220 pounds and 25% body fat, they still thought I was a monster. So I think that probably had to play a bigger role in it. When I got back into it, I didn't even know where to get any of that stuff anymore.
Quick question.
Yeah, go ahead, Taylor. Taylor, go ahead.
When let's pretend you were continuing on your path, how close do you feel, if you're honest with yourself, to getting your pro card? How many years away, or do you think it was pretty immediate in your future if you would have continued?
It's not, it's not up to me, but I think I was, there's the politics in the sport and stuff, and I think I was very favorably viewed as far as that's concerned. I think the people who were judging probably, I was one of the many. It's not like there's a few. There's probably many dozens of people who they were looking at as someone who would get a pro card. But yeah, I think probably in the next couple of years. I think actually the show I did in 2007, the USA's, I really fucked up. My kind of desire for bodybuilding faded about 10 days out of that show. I took pictures on my back porch. I think I was 266 pounds. I remember looking at them and feeling happy with how I looked, and my desire for it ended right there. So I didn't really look anywhere near as good as I could have at that show, but I think probably within the next couple of years, definitely. So
you were definitely always more motivated by just the physical progression than anything to do with the competitive side.
I really never liked bodybuilding shows. I'm not comfortable around a lot of people. I wear old baggy gray workout shirts and sweatpants at the gym. I don't show off. And actually, when you first, the weird thing, when you first start working out and you're in high school, you want everyone to notice you're gaining muscle. And so you look for shirts that look tight on your arms. But the problem is that, it takes so long to build muscle. And by the time you're big, by the time I was 285 pounds, I was married. My wife was in dental school. She's going to be a doctor. I have 3 little girls, 3 daughters. It's very uncomfortable around people to look like that. I didn't like looking big. I'm walking around with my 3 daughters and my normal looking wife, and you see people at the beach seeing, they're thinking like, what a, weird dad, that can't be.
What the fuck's that guy's deal? Yeah.
Yeah. You just kind of look like a douche basically. And so, yeah, I never felt comfortable with that. I would never I have no interest in posing I love the sport of bodybuilding and I love the progression and I love the mental struggle and I love getting into shape and the hard work involved. But as far as like the whole act of being on stage posing, I never really felt that great comfortable with it. I never felt at home there, I guess. And so, like you said, as soon as I knew I had beat my previous best, the show was kind of over for me. It was always hard once that happened, it was hard to kind of I always felt like I went into the show kind of, you want to cross the finish line in a full sprint, and break that first place tape. I always felt like I went across the finish line like limping and dragging a leg, and
your arms were up about 30 feet out, and then you kind of just slowed down.
Yeah.
Hey, let me wrap my head around something here because I've been my brain's like throbbing with this one. So you took 6 years off. Yeah. You got your master's in atomic physics. You're hanging out in the particle accelerator lab. I have no idea what that even means. And then you graduate. And it's 2013-ish?
Yeah, 2014. I graduated last spring, 2014.
2014. And then you wake up and then you have nothing to do and you get back into Troponin nutrition?
Yeah, well, that's the thing is I started looking for jobs and part of it was stupid. I was in the PhD program. I did PhD coursework and my research was for a PhD. The problem was I was very burned out on physics. Part of the reason I have a master's is basically I got so burned out, and at one point my thesis advisor kind of to tell me, I was making good progress and my research was coming along nicely. He said to encourage me, he said, you're making really good progress. You'd have enough for a master's thesis right now. He meant that as good progress. Keep working, and in another couple of years you'll have your PhD thesis and you'll be done. I heard that and I thought, Jesus Christ, I could be done right now, and so. Basically, that month, I submitted the work I had as a thesis and finished with my master's, which was really stupid because I spent a whole extra year in the PhD coursework that I didn't end up needing. And the other stupid thing is physics is a research field. So to do research, you need a PhD. There's no jobs for masters with physics. And so I got done, and I kind of thought, I don't know, I'm looking for jobs. I ended up finding a job. I work as a test engineer for Eaton right now, and I love my job, but I didn't know what I was going to do with a master's in physics. And so that's kind of how I got back into Troponin was basically, I really didn't know what was going to happen with that. My fear was I didn't want to start back up with Troponin because I thought, well, no one remembers who the hell I am. No one, how am I going to do this? I don't know anybody. I haven't been on the boards. No one knows. I'm going to go on the board and say, hey, what's up, guys? And everyone's like, who the fuck are you? And so I didn't know what to do really. And the way Troponin got started back up was I talked to a guy, Emmett Brown, who's a local bodybuilder, and he kind of convinced me. He said, no, guys, people remember you. Trust me, people remember you. And so I kind of trusted him on that, and that's kind of how that got started back up.
So that's your that's the game plan then? Because I was wondering, that's like, what is the job for a guy that has a degree, like you said, a degree in atomic physics? Like, where do you go from there? So do you have any regrets as far as going down that path, or would you have just done Troponin nutrition from the get-go, like 5 years ago?
I wish I would have. I wish I would have did the, when you're really mad and they tell you to take a step back and count to 10. I wish I would have did that I wish I would have counted to 10 before I sent in my application for the physics program.
Right.
Part of me, I partly feel like, it's a pretty cool accomplishment to have a master's in physics. And the other thing I kind of feel like when I get in science, I used to hate getting in science arguments on the internet because I'd be arguing about something that I knew was correct. And I wasn't arguing an opinion. I was stating what the scientific facts were, and someone else would come in and argue what I said. And basically the people reading might not understand the science and they don't know who to believe or who's right. And so it ends up being the person who uses all caps or who's willing to drag out the forum thread the longest, and that would drive me crazy. And so partly I feel like maybe the physics degree gives me some ability to say, hey, I guess I can say something and hopefully people will trust it as true scientifically, because that kind of gives me some, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for with that?
It's just credibility, I think, overall.
Yeah, some credibility as far as the science. But other than that, I do have a great job. I love my job as an engineer. I didn't need the physics for engineering, but I want to be able to work as an engineer with my exercise science degree, and I really do have a very cool job, and I get to do a lot of research program. Eaton, if anyone doesn't know, is they do superchargers, and their big thing is they used to own as high as 90% of the share for heavy duty transmissions, like in semi trucks. And so I get to do a lot of the campus I work on is we don't produce anything. We're kind of a pure R&D facility. So I get to do some pretty cool research type things on and I like cars and I like engines and things like that. So I get to do some pretty cool research stuff on transmission gearing and different things like different engineering aspects of that. So I do like my job, and I wouldn't be able to do that without the physics. But other than that, I think a part of me probably wishes I would have stuck with bodybuilding, and definitely would have stuck with troponin.
Right on. I think that does it. Justin, thanks for coming on with us on a Saturday. Do you have any plugs or anything you want to? How do people get a hold of you or reach out to you if they want to?
You can always find me at www.troponinnutrition.com, and that's TROPONIN nutrition. Or you can go to elitefts.com. I actually keep a training log there, and I answer questions there. And I guess that's about it.
Well, that sparks the what's on your future plans? Any pull back towards bodybuilding? We need to know.
I'm toying with the idea of doing a national show this year. My body weight's back up to, I've been as high as 281. I'm in the 270s right now. It's hard to tell. I feel like I'm getting close to where I was at my peak. I don't think I'm quite where I was in 2007, but I'm making progress real quick. I mean, I just started training again in April, and pretty much every week I'm still adding size. If I can get to where I think I need to be within enough time, I'd like to maybe try the Masters Nationals, and if not, maybe do the Nationals in the fall. That's kind of a tentative goal. I'm not really saying much because if it turns out and I back out of it, I don't want to. I'm pretty stubborn with things. Once I say I'm definitely going to do something, I'll go in and do it, even if I look like shit. So I don't want to say that yet, but I'm hopeful that I'll reach the point where I feel like I could do that.
So I think to sum it all up, what we've learned is that you actually like to be the dad that everybody goes, ooh.
Yeah. Well, we just went to this place called Sky Zone last weekend, which is like a trampoline park. Yeah, I felt pretty awkward walking in there with my kids, but even more awkward trying to bounce around in the trampoline.
Where the employees probably just terrified. They're like, "This guy's not going to jump, is he?"
Oh yeah. Well, I went in and I ended up playing a game of dodgeball with a bunch of kids and didn't hold back. I felt like a big man pushing them around.
It's like that scene in Billy Madison where he snaps on him just.
Exactly. Yeah, I had a blast, but I couldn't quite finish the game because about halfway through I was on the verge of a heart attack and ready to throw up. But it was fun while it lasted.
Well, we don't need another death in bodybuilding, especially not due to trampoline dodgeball. So
high test and trampoline does not mix.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
All right, Justin. Thanks a lot for coming on.
All right, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot, man.